Let's go. We're starting early, which is really very weird, actually, in Pakistan.
I think the only thing which starts on time in Pakistan is the load shedding. And finishes on time as well. So it's my great pleasure to be with Mohsin Hamid, the great writer, and I'm a thorough admirer of his work. So that's why, despite being Quddus Mirza, I insisted to change my identity. So I replaced Chiki Sarkar, and the reason is that she didn't get the visa, since our government is very cheeky in these terms. So I'm here to introduce Mohsin Hamid, and he's going to talk about his new book, forthcoming book, How to Get Filthy Rich in Rising Asia. And actually the book, when I read the title of the book, I was really curious. What kind of book is this? So can I ask you, what kind of book is this?
It's a pretty short book.
With a long title.
With a long title. I had this idea. I was in New York and with a friend of mine who's a literary editor. We should probably ask everybody to turn off their mobile phones if you don't mind. And so I was in New York and I met a friend who was an editor of a literary magazine. And we started talking about literary fiction and how sometimes it can be hard going as a reader. And we, reading books that we admired, but really, and why were we doing this? And I said, maybe it's a kind of self-help. And so we were joking, and I said, well, I think my next novel is going to be a self-help book. And it was supposed to be a joke, and I came back to Lahore, and the months went by, and I couldn't shake this idea, because I felt when I write novels, it is a kind of self-help for me. And when I read novels, it's also a kind of self-help. So although the novel, How to Get Filthy Rich in Rising Asia, is supposedly a self-help manual about how to get filthy rich, it's also, for me, a self-help manual for my own life.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing is about this novel, if I may allow to say this, that since I read his Moth Smoke and your other book, Reluctant Fundamentalist, and I realized that as a novelist, I think you're more like an architect who designs a book, who does not really just write a book. And I think I'm very curious about to know that kind of, you say this is a self-help book, but I think when you read it, and I am kind of one of those few people, few hundred, who have read the book before it's going to be launched in 2 weeks' time. And then I realized that the book actually talks to you, and the reader becomes the character, the main character in the book. And I think that's a kind of interesting device which you used, because there's no name of the character, there's no name of the main actor or main protagonist, and then all the other characters in the book do not have any names. And while you finish the book, you don't really realize that you've just finished a book without any names. How did this idea came to you, that's not putting any names?
Well, there were a number of different things that came into it. So the only names in the novel are continent names: Asia, North America, Europe. And the reason why there are no other names, no character has a name, the city has no name, the religions have no name, there's no word like mosque or church, was because I felt that, writing in Pakistan, about Pakistan, so much of what we say is shaped by what we've already heard. Pakistan is a place like this, and Islam means that, and a mosque is this, and I felt, maybe I'm just regurgitating what I've been told, and I'm not really seeing the city around me, the country around me with my own eyes. So I'm a writer, and as a writer, you have to find ways using writing to think differently. And I thought if I use no names, if I use no names, then I have to describe what is. So there is no Pakistan, there is no Lahore, there is no Islam, there is none of that in this book. It's just people doing things. And then what starts to come out of it, in a way, it's like, if you're describing an iPhone, the way we talk about an iPhone usually is to say that, this is an iPhone, it has apps, and it lets you do this, it lets you do that, etc. But we're using brand names for the whole thing. If you take away the brand names and you say, this is a little small block of machinery that I put to my ear, I can use it to speak to other people and to do X, Y, Z, it becomes a much more bizarre thing. Taking away the name iPhone reveals a really weird interaction you're having with a machine. And so I thought taking away the name Pakistan and Lahore, etc., would be part of it. That was one part. The other part of it was, I think, there's often this critique out there that people say, oh, you are exploiting, Pakistan, you're writing about Pakistan, etc., etc. And I think it's just nonsense. But part of it is to say, it's a type of censorship. When people get out there and say, why are Pakistani writers writing about this or writing about that? They should write about this. They're exploiting. It's the same nonsense we hear. Why do you believe in this God or no God? Why do you love this man or no, woman, whatever? It's too much should in our society. And so, as a writer, you have two choices. Either you cave in, or you become silent, and you use silence selectively. And so for me, having no names gives me the freedom to say whatever I want. I don't have to be worried, how is this portraying Pakistan? The word Pakistan never appears in the book. How is it portraying our religion? What religion is it? In a way, hopefully you can speak more honestly, because you just tell everybody, look, if you are so attached to these brands of country and religion and whatever else it is, have them. They're yours. Let me just talk about people. And the last thing is, as far as using no names is concerned, and I find it so, I do find it so annoying, this whole nonsensical, what people should write about, etc. The whole point of art is not to have any of that. You do what you want to do, and in our society where we're so restricted to be held back, so sometimes I think it's better just to shut up and to find a different way of saying things. And to be honest, the inspiration for this, this kind of a motif comes from our poetry and our tradition, which is to say, if certain things cannot be said, find a different vocabulary for it. Talk about a lover. Don't talk about perhaps what you might otherwise talk about. So, and the last thing about the no names thing is, so often we think if you're going to write about the world, an American novel, a novel set in America tells us what the world is today. If you want to describe the great urban migration of billions of poor people to cities, which is the transforming planet Earth right now, what cities do you pick? What are the archetypal cities? It's London, it's New York, it's Tokyo, it's whatever. Why can't it be Lahore? I think that I don't believe in really national identification and religious identification. None of it. Those are things that one imagines. One believes. But a city is real. It exists. I am a Lahori, and so I wanted to also, by taking away names, write a novel that wasn't, oh, look at Pakistan, what an interesting, weird place that's in your headlines. Instead, it was to say, this is humanity. You can find the world here. You can find the universe in a human being, and you can find humanity in this place. And so it was an attempt to escape from this sort of exotic pigeonholing and take on, humanity as a whole.
I think that's a very interestingly put. And I realized that if you are not using any names, you are kind of really expanding the story. So when I read the story, I realized this may be about myself as well, like somebody who's from a village came to Lahore and then got to a point. And I feel that this way, I realized that the way you described the village, that was really interesting because how can a person who lived all his life in cities can describe a village and the scenes of village and the kind of a situation of a village? And I particularly remember the line which you wrote in the book and which kind of made me laugh. It says like, because in the villages, in the small villages, in the small houses where many families share the same house and like few people share the same room, and you said, and you wrote that in that situation, the only way to have sex in private is to have it in open. I think, and how come you, did you study or did you do some research? Or, I should say, did you have an experience? But,
you know, this is, I mean, I'm a believer in writing. You know, this is what I do. And it's not sort of a hobby, it's not, you know, this is the way that I relate to planet Earth and being here. You know, this is my you know, basic attempt to sort of make sense of what's going on. And you know, writing for me is really about imagining being other people. And so my starting point isn't the villager is someone different from me. My starting point is if I am in this context, I am a 70-year-old woman in a house looking at her much younger daughter-in-law, seeing her son, having certain thoughts, how do I feel? And so it's not that, you know, for me, I don't believe this notion that, you know, the villager is some, yeah, they have a different vocabulary, different context. But you know, you animate them with the same humanity as anybody else. Now, whether it is a realistic portrait of a villager, who knows? But that isn't even the point. The point of it is, in a world where so much is telling us to, you know, focus on ourselves, to be egocentric, to be rooted in us as individuals. You know, writing, art, what you do, religion, I mean, many things, they are ways to transcend yourself and to, you know, to get outside of, you know, this thing. And so as a writer, the way to write, for me, a villager is, if I'm a 76-year-old lady, how do I feel? And when I wrote my first novel, I didn't know how to write characters. And so I was writing this character of Mumtaz, who was a woman in moth smoke. And the only way for me to really understand her was to write in her voice for a couple of chapters. And now I'm, you know, it's 15, 20 years later from the time I started moth smoke. And I think now I don't go through the full exercise of writing in somebody's voice to imagine them. I simply go into the position of thinking, you know, I want to be this. And the best reminder for me of this whole process is I have a 3-year-old daughter. And, you know, she will come to my room, she'll bang on my door, and she says, you know, Durana Kholo, and I'll say, you know, Kaun hai? And she'll say, Bina Hamid. So I open the door, and she comes and sits on my bed, and I said, Kya kar rahi ho? And she says, Baba, main kaam kar rahi hu. Because that's what I say to her. But anyway, we have a little debate, and she's the only person who can interrupt me when I'm working. And so we have this debate, and then she says, so who are you? I said, I'm your Baba. She says, no, I'm little fish. Are you a jellyfish? and you know, that's what I do for a living. And she, you know, children are a reminder. We have this in us, this sort of universal sense of transcendence, of imagination, of being something else. And it gets shut down. People try to just shut it down your whole life. That if you say this, if you imagine this, if you be this, it has to be closed. And so, you know, as a writer, you know, my belief is that it has to stay open, and that's how I approach character, and that's how I approach fiction, and that's how I approach, you know, try to approach human beings.
Thank you. And then talking about the book, you said that it is about Pakistan, yet there are no names. And when you read the book, you find references, snatching of money and violence, and there are many other local references. Yet, despite its political references and political aspects and clues, it is a great love story. It's a great love story between two people, two characters who couldn't meet, and when they turn into their like 70s.
Don't give the ending away.
Oh,
Something happens later.
I'm talking about another book.
What book is there?
Love in the Time of Cholera. So you wrote a great love story, and I feel that all novels are love stories of one kind or another kind. But how did this idea of writing a love story came to you?
It's interesting, in Italian, the word for novel is romanzo, romance. And in many languages, that notion of the novel starting as a romance is sort of foundational. And all of my novels are romances in a way, they're love stories. Partly I think I'm a sucker for love stories, I like love stories. And partly because, in our tradition, in our poetic tradition in this part of the world, there has been for thousands of years an understanding that among the ways in which we human beings can be less anxious about and frightened of our mortality, of our inevitable death, is to spread our attachment beyond ourselves, to feel strongly enough for something which isn't us, that the cessation of us is no longer so overwhelmingly horrible. And so this is what Sufi poetry is, in a sense, variations on this theme. And for me too, I mean, I'm a deeply secular writer, but I think that in a world where you have these two competing forces, or two very strong forces, you have the religious sort of system and belief systems, which have addressed these issues and do address these issues. But as they become politicized, they are less about the concern of how do I deal with the fact that I'm going to die, and they are more about the concern that I belong to this group. And so that tribal identification, if that starts to take over religion, it leaves a giant void where the spiritual side of religion formerly resided. And on top of that, you put this thing, which is the market. And Pakistan is an uber-capitalist society. If you have no money in Pakistan, you will die. It is a very, very, very hard existence that we, as a country, have imposed upon ourselves. The market determines all. If you can afford a generator, you've got bijli. If you can afford clean water like we are, you won't get dysentery. But if you don't, you live in darkness and you might die of diarrhea. So the market is prevalent here, and it's getting stronger all over the world. But how does the market answer this question? Because the market says you're afraid of getting old. Get a hair transplant, get a boob job, get a pension plan. It says you have anxieties, we will monetize those anxieties. It doesn't say, here is how we can make you less anxious. The anxiety is the point of the market. So therefore, if in a world where religion is increasingly politicized and the market doesn't offer any answers, we have to look other places, or we have to look in other ways. And so that takes us back to the idea of the love story, that takes us back to the idea of art functioning in this way. And also because, the problem with the market narrative is growth. You see, the market says, how do I get more money? How do I get a bigger house? How do I have a bigger car? More, more, more. But human existence is only half about growth. The other half of human existence is loss. We will lose everything. That is what it is to be a human being and what it is to be alive. We lose it all. And so they equal the growth and loss. But what is our vocabulary for talking about loss? How do we speak of loss? You know, how do we talk about getting older, getting frailer, dying? I mean, it's, you know, this is all you know, morbid stuff. But it's important to speak of it and to speak of it even joyfully, because if we don't speak of it, what winds up happening, and I think what has happened in our society and is happening around the world, is you end up with a severe human psychosis, a mental illness that is all around us. When you look around at the society of ours, when I look around at the society, and not just our society, all over the world, I see insanity. This is not sane, what's going on here. You know, this is not, oh, I understand because America is doing this and there's drones and so therefore it all makes sense. No. It is profound mental illness leading to all kinds of terrible stuff. Therefore, what antidotes have we got? What vaccinations are there out there for this stuff? And fortunately, we come, you know, with a built-in capacity for love. And in its different manifestations, you know, that is the potent antidote we have. And I think as a writer, it's something I want to explore.
Thank you. And I'm not going to leak more. I'm not going to leak more clues about the stories. So I request Mohsin to read something from the book. Please.
Oh, great. I forgot mine at home, so I picked up this. The book is out in 2 weeks, actually. I apologize. I'd hoped that it would be here for this festival, but this free chapter is available at the bookshop. And people are saying, oh, what a great, you know, marketing ploy. And the honest truth of it was, I didn't think of it as a marketing ploy, because if you read one chapter, you might decide not to buy the book. But I thought of it more from the standpoint of, you know, to have a conversation, it'd be great if people could have read or could read something, and so you can. I'll just read from the beginning. And you know, one more thing I have to say, and I don't know how all of you are feeling, but it gives me so much pleasure to see Lahore like this. Yeah. You know. I'm gonna, you know, I'm going to get emotional if I say any more, but it's just, this is our city. You know, it's nonsense what everybody says, that the place is like this or not like this, etc. It's just not true. You know, you scrap a little bit of the nonsense away and you see what comes out underneath. It's this. You know, there are yellow balloons out there. I wish there were yellow kites in the sky. And I wish that, you know, it's, you know, this city, I'm madly in love with the city. I have been my whole life. And, you know, I think it's just important to get together in public like this. You know, we have an online and TV space, and we interact there, and there's more and more stuff happening on television, etc., etc. But you can do that and still not really believe. But if you come in and thousands of people come and do something like this, you have to believe. I mean, people are here. So anyway, I have to say this is really, for me as a writer, you know, one of the happiest days of my life, and I'm really happy to be here. Look, unless you're writing one, a self-help book is an oxymoron. You read a self-help book so someone who isn't yourself can help you. That someone being the author. This is true of the whole self-help genre. It's true of how-to books, for example. And it's true of personal improvement books, too. Some might even say it's true of religion books. But some others might say that those who say that should be pinned to the ground and bled dry with the slow slice of a blade across their throats. So it's wisest simply to note a divergence of views on that subcategory and move swiftly on. None of the foregoing means that self-help books are useless. On the contrary, they can be useful indeed. But it does mean that the idea of self in the land of self-help is a slippery one. And slippery can be good. Slippery can be pleasurable. Slippery provide access to what would chafe if entered dry. This book is a self-help book. Its objective, as it says on the cover, is to show you how to get filthy rich in rising Asia. And to do that, it has to find you, huddled, shivering, on the packed earth under your mother's cot one cold, dewy morning. Your anguish is the anguish of a boy whose chocolate has been thrown away, whose remote controls are out of batteries, whose scooter is busted, whose new sneakers have been stolen. This is all the more remarkable since you've never in your life seen any of these things. The whites of your eyes are yellow, a consequence of spiking bilirubin levels in your blood. The virus afflicting you is called hepatitis E. Its typical mode of transmission is fecal oral. Yum. It kills only about 1 in 50, so you're likely to recover. But right now, you feel like you're going to die. Your mother has encountered this condition many times, or conditions like it anyway. So maybe she doesn't think you're going to die. Then again, maybe she does. Maybe she fears it. Everyone is going to die. And when a mother like yours sees in a third-born child like you the pain that makes you whimper under her cot the way you do, maybe she feels your death push forward a few decades, take off its dark, dusty headscarf, and settle with open hair familiarity and a lascivious smile into this, the single mud-walled room she shares with all of her surviving offspring. What she says is, "Don't leave us here." Your father has heard this request of hers before. This does not make him completely unsusceptible to it, however. He is a man of voracious sexual appetite, and he often thinks while he is away of your mother's heavy breasts and solid, ample thighs, and he still longs to thrust himself inside her nightly, rather than on just 3 or 4 visits per year. He also enjoys her unusually rude sense of humor, and sometimes her companionship as well. And although he is not given to displays of affection towards their young, he would like to watch you and your siblings grow. His own father derived considerable pleasure from the daily progress of crops in the fields. And in this, at least insofar as it is analogous to the development of children, the two men are similar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think we should invite a question from the hall, because I realize that we as a nation have a great, and we'll get great questions, I'm sure, because we as a nation have a great ability to talk about things which we haven't read yet. I haven't read the book. I just read the review which came out in the New York Times, a great review. So tonight I'm going to take the book back and read it. So I would like you to ask question, and I think we see the first hand. How to raise your hand in a thriving auditorium?
Yeah, Mohsin, how do you rate research being done in academic institutions, nationally as well as internationally, on your work or works of other Pakistani writers?
To be honest, I'm the wrong person to ask. And I think it's hugely important, this kind of work. But as a writer, I'm a little nervous about reading people's writing about me. If you look at how Facebook works, half of the people I know are now, getting dressed, having experiences, and living in part to share it on Facebook. You know, that there's this thing that, okay, wait, before we go, take a picture. Why are we taking a picture at this moment? We're taking it because of this thing. And you know, there's a great narcissistic impulse in all of us. You know, we want the mirror, and we want the world to look at us, all these sorts of things. And I think that's just death for a writer. You know, if you start, you know, believing the hype about yourself, and you start getting into the, you know, debates around this stuff, I think you can become very self-conscious, and so I'm frightened, to be honest, of reading too much academic writing about writing. You know, it's like if you're dancing, and somebody says, you know, that I'm a student of dance, and I was seeing you dancing at this party, and I'd like to offer the following, you know, assessment. Your hip movement is quite, you know, rhythmic. There's a real African-American sensibility there, but there's a, you know, the shoulder carriage is, you know, deeply Bhangra-based, and the next time you're on a dance floor, you're going to, you know, be this totally stiff, self-conscious. So I think the wonderful thing is when I go and speak at universities in Pakistan, which I try to do often, I'm amazed by the kind of engagement that's happening in graduate faculties and in undergraduate faculties. And one of the nicest things that has happened to me recently at the Karachi Literary Festival was I met two women who had come down from Peshawar because they were teaching, you know, my books and also those of other writers in Peshawar, one from, I think, Islamia College and one from another university there. And they said, you know, the students have all these questions and we want, you know, your answers. And I was sort of, I don't have the answers, but it is amazing. You know, I don't feel at all. People sometimes say this thing of, you know, nobody reads your stuff. You know, you write in English. It's understandable that people will feel this way, but it's also just not true. You know, this stereotype that we have, that English is only the language of the Pakistani rich, is false. Other people are reading in English. It's just that we've imposed a caste system that we don't allow people access to English unless they're from our families, and we make it difficult for them to get an English education. Sure, but despite that, you have people reading, and I met this one young man in Karachi. He had read Moth Smoke with three friends in Rahim Yar Khan. They chipped in to buy one bus ticket. He came down, he gave me a letter saying, you know, we love the sex scenes and drug scenes in Moth Smoke. And, you know, I wanted to give you this letter telling you, dude, this is great, and write more stuff like this. You know, he's not, you know, having coffee in Gulberg. I suppose, you know, the way of saying it is, I think the universities are doing a huge and important function of spreading literature, of allowing access to English language writing and not just Urdu language writing, because English is a Pakistani language, you know, among others. And I value that, but I can't really assess, you know, in detail what's going on.
Yeah.
Humorous interludes. This is wonderful to have somebody like you sitting next to a wonderful author. Well, Mohsin, you are so bright to Pakistan. So are other young writers, so writing in vernacular and in English. And you are spreading the word around that we are such wonderful people. We are terrorists. Amazing books you've written. Now, the drawback is that we haven't read your book. And to pretend that I have seen it probably secretly is also not true. As your companion has admitted, he hasn't read it either.
He has. Chiki Sarkar was supposed to lock it.
But actually, you can read many times.
Yeah,
and then you really read it.
I'm sure. But, well, I did pick up this chapter that you had floated freely. for those who wanted an insight into your new work. And truly, I was amazed. It's a progression from the first book and the second book, and an amazing insight the way you describe the character and the surroundings. Now, my question is, I would like others to ask questions. Is it experiential? Have you gone and lived in the village? Have you actually gone around and seen what happens? Or is it that you have such wonderful, fertile imagination that you were able to weave magic in your words?
I'm sort of almost embarrassed to speak. It's very kind of you to say what you have said. You know, it's as a writer, I privilege the human being with agency to do what she or he wants to do. That is my starting point. And so I just live my life. I try to avoid publicity as much as I can, and I sort of go into a little hole, and I have a few friends, many of whom are in this audience right now, and I have my family, and that's where I live. That's what my existence is that. I don't really do research, but I live, I travel around, I see stuff. If I'm in a village, I'm looking. If I'm in a factory, I'm looking. If I'm driving. And it's out of that I write. But, we have in our culture a sort of license Raj is what they've called it in India. You have to have permission to do this, to do that, whatever. The government doesn't give you permission to do things in theory. But the same applies to speech, for example, one of the things which I think is unfortunate is I do sometimes perceive there's a sense that, you don't have the right to speak about things. What do you know about Lahore? What do you know about Pakistan? What do you know about the villages? What do you know about Islam? What do you know about anything? Maybe nothing. But so what? Who says I have to know something to speak? Who authorizes me to say anything? So really, the chapter you're referring to and the city is just a guy, who lives here, thinking about this stuff, looking around and saying, writing what comes to mind. That's really it. It also even applies in this. There's I think a really unfortunate sort of Urdu-English, you could say tension that has come up and many times in this festival. And the fact that I don't write in Urdu is not something that I take pride in. It's a handicap. I wish I could write in Urdu. I don't celebrate my inability to write in Urdu decently. It's horrible. But that doesn't mean that I can't write about this place. It doesn't mean that to judge a writer by the language they write in is like judging a human being by their religion. It is or their race. It's an absurdity. What are they saying? That's what matters. So to your point, it's just I'm one of you. I live here and look at stuff and I write about it, and I give myself permission to write about it.
Thank you. Please.
First of all, I have to admit this fact that it was really nice to have you here. And when I was listening to the chapter of your free chapter of the book, I was reminded of the Gunter Grass Tim Drum, how that German writer, he wrote about his nation very bravely, I must say. I must salute you. You are doing on the same track. And my question was that I wanted to know what is your idea, as I'm writing, having thesis on your book, Reluctant Fundamentalism. I just want to listen from you. What is your idea of identity and fundamentalism? And what was the driving force which made you write this excellent book?
Well, in The Reluctant Fundamentalist, I think, people often say that this is a novel about, a a terrorist or a Muslim fundamentalist or whatever. But the simple fact is, religion doesn't appear in the book ever. Nothing violent ever happens. It is a novel of two men sitting at a cafe table in Purani Narkali, having some tea and then having dinner, talking. And you only hear half of it. And so, I'm no expert on fundamentalism, or religion. I wanted to say that you can describe things in purely human terms, political terms, secular terms, and wind up, if you give the guy a beard and have him sitting opposite from an American, you wind up with something to happen in the imagination. We're just sitting here, and I didn't let Kadu Saab speak, and I just, kept talking, which I'm sort of doing. But he was an American. It was just the two of us. He was quite big. I've had a beard, etc. And we are now observing this situation. Yeah. A discomfort sets in. We have been made uncomfortable. For me, what that book is, it's not trying to explain what a terrorist is or a fundamentalist is. That wasn't my project. My project was, if you make a hole, you will put something inside that hole. And if what comes into that hole is fear and suspicion and dread and violence, how did that get inside the reader in the first place? That's what's interesting to me. So it is, I guess, what are my views on fundamentalism, etc.? I find the term, I don't know what it means. What is fundamentalism? I have no idea. There are different types of behaviors and different types of beliefs, there's different things. The word is a tricky word. But I'm much more interested, rather than pronouncing on fundamentalism or on religion, etc., I'm more interested in offering to the reader an invitation to together explore how we feel. That's what my project was in that book.
Thank you. Please. Thank you.
Oh,
Pepsi.
I think we have to go. Oh, sorry, yeah.
Hello.
Can we get the lights on the
Can I
audience?
speak?
But I think that,
Let's take her question first.
yes, okay, yes.
Can I speak now?
And then Pepsi.
You partially answered my question, but I need
there
you
you are.
to. There I am. I needed you to elaborate it further. When the language of your experience is Urdu and Punjabi, and the language of your expression is English, how do you resolve their dichotomy, not from the writer's point of view, but from the character's point of view? Putting a foreign language in their mouth and making them true to character. What's the technique to manage that? Because I can't seem to overcome that handicap. How do you do it?
Look, my handicap is that I don't have another language to use for it. I cannot deploy Urdu or Punjabi well enough to articulate what I want to say. So it is just, I make the best of the handicap I have. And so, it comes to then, how do you articulate what people are saying? Focus on what they're saying. You don't have to sound like a buffoon in English, and you don't have to conflate to some English rendition of what Urdu and Punjabi sounds like. I'm not saying that writers shouldn't do that, and everybody should do whatever they want, but I don't think that's the only avenue open as a writer, to make English sound like Urdu or Punjabi. I think, and people do it effectively. It can be hilarious, it can be powerful. It's not, I'm not precluding it. It's not what I want to do, really. I'd rather, say, what is this human being saying? And then try to express that. So, in this novel, I don't think the characters speak in a particularly Pakistani way, or at least the way we think that Urdu and Punjabi should be expressed in the English form. But I'm okay with that. I'm not particularly trying to achieve that effect, and in part because I would like this novel to equally easily be set in Caracas or Sao Paulo or Lagos or Johannesburg or Bangkok. You know, we aren't so different. We're, you know, human beings on planet Earth, we're doing similar things. And so, you know, it's just people talking. And partly I'm at this point, you know, as I said, because I'm writing in English. But even English, you know, I mean, language, which is my medium, you know, Kadu Saab works in other media, you know, visual media. But it's a representation. You know, I'm speaking to you right now, and I'm saying things to you right now. But the things I'm saying are very imprecise. You know, I'm sort of muddling my way through trying to say something in response to what you said. We can't really articulate ourselves.
You have answered it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
But what I was trying to say is that because language itself is a muddle. You know, when I describe this thing as a table, is it? You know, it's a sort of weird-looking lock. So we're all stumbling. And I think rather than be hung up on the self-consciousness and the sort of, you know, the pervasive sense that either we're not good enough or we're doing something wrong or whatever, I think just doing the best you can to express it is what we're all trying to do, and we should do.
Thank you.
Can I
But
ask a question
I think we have to.
Mohsin, I do want to ask you, I think it's on a lot of people's minds that Meera Nair is making your book into a film. And are you working on the script yourself? And is it changing a lot from the reluctant fundamentalist? You know, the character who is just present there and you feel he's an American character. Does he come more alive in the film? Does he speak? Is there a different dimension there?
Well, the question is for you who don't know, perhaps he said one. And you know, it is really just such an honor and pleasure to have you back in town. You know, before I answer your question, because when I was growing up, I remember reading Crow Eaters was the first of your books that I read, and I just fell in love. You know, so you're here, and it must be said publicly that you are adored as a writer in this place, and you're you know, wonderful. And in response to your question, it's very weird to have a movie made. And it's not, I wouldn't even say the term adaptation is the wrong term. They're completely different forms. You see, when you watch a movie, you know, you see on a screen a guy who looks like Brad Pitt, sort of looking at a woman who looks like Angelina Jolie, as a soundtrack that is, you know, played by Coldplay, is playing in the background, and you know, things are happening. It's imagined. It's there. I mean, it's not really there, but it's almost there. When you read a book, you are receiving, you know, a series of abstract symbols called letters. That's what it looks like. It has nothing to do with the experience of reading a book. It is a completely abstract form. You're getting the source code. It's the matrix that's coming your way. And you are processing this matrix into, you know, people and emotions and, you know, images. And the reader is creating all of that stuff. The reader is transforming, you know, this into actual senses of human beings. So there's no such thing as an adaptation of a novel. There are simply films that use elements from novels and titles from novels, and are films. And now, so there is a film which uses the title of my novel and characters from my novel as being made by Meera Nair. Hopefully it'll be in about 2 months. And it is different from the book. It is, you know, it's more imagined for you, as films always are. Because, in a sense, the core of that book, The Reluctant Fundamentalist, was on not being imagined and having you imagining And your process of imagining is the point of that book. That's why it works. So in the film, it's not as ambiguous, I would say. But it does have something else which is very special, because what I do, I sit in a room by myself for hours writing, as you do. And, but in a film set, there are hundreds of people working collaboratively to make something. And that is a fantastic and beautiful and incredible thing. It's an entirely different human endeavor. Just gorgeous to watch it happen. So in the film of this, Ratan Fundamentalist film, it isn't perhaps as ambiguous as the novel, but in its creation, in its form, represents so many of the answers to the question the novel is posing. You have Riz Ahmed, a brilliant British Pakistani actor. I mean, really, really smart and good. He's not, sometimes we say, oh, he's good for Desi or good for it. He's just good. He's a proper actor. He's the lead. And he's supported by people like Hudson and Leah Schreiber and Kiefer Sutherland, who, are playing supporting roles for almost no money in this movie. And his parents are played by, Om Puri and Shabana Azmi, who are brilliant Indian actors. Misha Shafi plays his sister. These people are from all over. Haluk Bilginer plays this book publishing executive, a Turkish actor. And the crew that worked on it, are from all over the world. We had, everything from, Lahoris like Ali Sethi intimately involved in making sure that certain sensibilities are conveyed. And we had, Meera herself, who's a genius director who is Indian. Making a novel adaptation or making a film, I've now used the word, making a film, which is inspired by a novel that is written by Pakistani. So it's a different thing, but it's a wonderful different thing. It is. I feel very, very fortunate to have been able to watch something like this happen. As a writer, it's amazing to see people working in this way, and I'm almost envious of people who work in film, that they get to do this stuff together. But at the end of the day, having been born in the filmmaking process, I still am compelled to write books. I still, believe in the book. Although I love movies, but I believe in the book because, the book is the narrative form which involves the most creation on the part of the reader. And that's a very special thing, because you read by yourself in solitude, but thinking. If you look at our lives today, how much time do we spend in solitude thinking? We're on our phones, we're talking to people, we're working, we're doing this. When you sit down for a day or 2 days or a week, a novel, by yourself, reading it, it's a very, very unusual time in a human being's existence when they do this. And it's a very special form and a very special relationship. So I'm, if anything, even more in love with novels now than I was before. But I've also increased my affection for and respect for film along the way.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's unfair.
I think it's better if you speak in mic. It's going to be there soon.
Yeah.
So Mike's here.
Yeah.
Just to say that I am a student and teacher of literature, and I can see thousands, maybe hundreds number of students and teachers that I'm familiar with, and of course, educationists. Bapsi Sidhwa came with her Ice Candy movie to Kinnaird when we were students and showed it to us. So here is Lahore at its best, and many congratulations to you, Mohsin, because I belong now to a university where the literature department is perhaps the oldest literature department after the Punjab University, which is the Lahore College Women University. And we have 300 applicants every year for 40 seats of literature. And I think it says a great deal about the revival of literature again, once again, in Lahore, in our country. And I think this is really a tribute to authors like you, to authors like Sara Soleri, to authors like Bapsi Sidhwa. We are so proud of you, and also to add here that you have once again made us think and rethink, our students, ourselves, that reading is for pleasure. Reading is a pastime or a hobby that must never, never be forgotten, and that it can be a very pleasurable thing. And I agree with you that your books are also very thought-provoking and really make you I would say, look into yourself, your inner self, and see and try and find yourself somewhere there. So congratulations, Mohsin, for adding to the wonderful literature that we already have in Lahore.
Thank you.
Was it a question?
Yes, I think it was the answer. No, I don't know. It was not a question. It was very sweet, and thank you.
Sir, I have one word for you. That is thank you. I'm here in this hall because of you, and I'm here in the city because of you. I had got admission in other cities, but I chose Lahore after reading Smoke, and I wanted to live. So that story mesmerized me so much that I wanted to live the feelings, and I had never been to Lahore first, but after reading that book, I did come here and I joined university here. It's been a year, and I'm thankful to my decision that I did, and after reading that book. So my question to you is that for being amateur writers, do you think that in the future time you will provide any platform for them that if they can submit their work and you can have the critique so they could have counseling and could find like-minded youth and mentors as well, so they could progress with their work. Do you have any such plan in the future?
Well, you know, it's really important what you're saying, and you know, these festivals are great. The Karachi Festival is amazing, and this one I think has been really, really lovely. And there are many other older festivals that have been happening in Lahore, literarily and elsewhere in the country, which we don't talk about as much because they're not predominantly in English. But you know, the biggest gap for me is we need a publishing industry here. I was in talks at one point. The CEO of Penguin Books came to Lahore, and we were trying to convince him that, you know, they should open an office, not necessarily Penguin, but maybe a conglomerate of international publishers should get together, open an office in Lahore. And just at that time, you know, our governor, who was a believer in freedom of expression, had guaranteed security, and was assassinated 2 months later. And so the idea didn't go further. But even if whether international publishers come or don't come, I think we need to have that here. And you know, for aspiring writers, and well, there's no such thing as an aspiring writer. There are people who write and people who don't write. There are certainly those who have not been published in book form for money, which we usually mean when we say aspiring writer. But the amazing thing is, there is this thing, I've been told, I'm a bit older, you know, called the internet. And there should be, I think, initially, and you know, in addition to printed magazines, etc., we need to have a lot more student literary journals where people are putting their stuff out there and reading it and debating it and sharing it. You know, if as a writer you feel that there aren't enough places for your voices to get out, make those places. You know, and you don't need anyone's permission. Get it out there. And if it is, you know, looking for an agent and you have a completed manuscript and it's polished as much as you can polish it, by all means approach me. I would be very happy to introduce you to my agent. but that's one part of it. I think the real thing is what's for me one thing about Lahore is that Lahore is a cosmopolitan city. It had itself its